as we mentioned, former President Obama also warned Mr. Trump about General Flynn. Mr. Obama voiced his concerns during a 90-minute conversation in the Oval Office just 2 days after the election. Obama had fired Flynn back in 2014 from his post at the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. And yesterday, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said his disapproval of Flynn shouldn't come as a surprise.
It's true that President Obama made it known that he wasn't exactly a fan of General Flynn's, which is frankly shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, that given that General Flynn had worked for President Obama, was an outspoken critic of President Obama's shortcomings. So the question that you have to ask yourself really is, if President Obama was truly concerned about General Flynn, why didn't he suspend General Flynn's security clearance, which they had just reapproved months earlier? Additionally, why did the Obama administration let Flynn go to Russia for a paid speaking engagement and receive a fee? I mean, there were steps that they could have taken that, if that was truly a concern, more than just a person that had bad blood.
So let us bring in CBS News White House and Foreign Affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan. Margaret, you heard what Sean Spicer had to say. His question was, listen, why would they reapprove his security clearance if he was such a problem? What are you hearing from any Obama administration officials about this explanation?
Well, there are two issues here. One, the White House didn't issue Michael Flynn his security clearance. He was, if you remember, a general in the Army and a Defense Intelligence Agency chief. So because he ran at one point an intelligence agency until Obama fired him in 2014, he was in that position allowed to keep his clearance so that his successor could on occasion call him and consult with him. That's really a privilege granted to intelligence chiefs after their departure from office. So Michael Flynn held his security clearance from 2014 because the DIA and the Defense Department allowed him to keep it. It was reissued in 2016 because there were no concerns at that time regarding the paperwork he had filed. It appeared from the DIA's position that he had filled out everything he needed to in terms of declaring his foreign travel and contacts with foreign individuals. However, after all of this latest scandal came to light in regard to misleading statements Flynn made to the vice president about the nature of his contacts with the Russian ambassador, more information came out about Michael Flynn's work and the travel he did, and it came to light that he did not disclose financial compensation that he received related to Russia. That would have caused an issue with his security clearance being reissued in 2016, but it was not known at the time, according to what defense officials tell me. Separately, though, the White House doesn't have any role with deciding the security clearance. If you want to argue that they could have sort of jumped out of their lane and pressure the Defense Department to revoke a clearance, they would have had to have grounds for doing that. And Michael Flynn was fired in 2014 because of a disagreement over management and some very different points of view on ISIS and Iran, according to Flynn. And so this wasn't an issue at the time of having evidence that he was doing anything wrong, just that he was fired because President Obama didn't like him.
Right. And we also learned yesterday that there was an 18-day gap between the time that Sally Yates first met with the White House counsel and told them about her concerns about General Flynn and when he was actually dismissed from the White House. What's the justification for such long a wait, or the explanation?
Well, there really hasn't been a sufficient explanation, and this is one of the most problematic issues and will continue to be for the Trump White House, which is why was it not viewed with greater concern that the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States had misled the Vice President and that he had publicly told Americans at home, American taxpayers who he has pledged to serve, flat out wrong information, right? That's the argument that Sally Yates would say would make him vulnerable to future blackmail by somebody else, like the Russians. However, it seems to be that the White House response was that the nature of the conversation and the fact that there was lying between White House officials to them didn't rise to the level of concerns that it would make them vulnerable. It was sort of dismissed, according to reporting by White House counsel Don McGahn, as why does it matter if officials here lie to each other. So it seems to be that it was a very different view of the level of concern here regarding the nature of Michael Flynn's phone calls, the information exchanged on that. We still don't really know much about those conversations, if Michael Flynn mentioned sanctions in passing when he was talking to the Russian ambassador, or whether he really spoke in depth. And so it really comes down to a matter of perspective on that.
So why does it matter? One of the reasons that it may matter is if the law was broken in any way.
Exactly.
But Ms. Yates was asked outright whether or not she thought Michael Flynn had broken the law, and she refused to answer that question. Does that remain an open question?
Well, we know that there has been an ongoing FBI probe, FBI, separate from the other intelligence agencies here, into the nature of contacts between Trump campaign officials and associates and Russian contacts, officials or those with some links to the Russian government. So as part of that, it has become, Michael Flynn has been investigated as part of that. He was spoken to. We do know, because of those open testimonies, we do know that there have been White House officials who have been questioned about him. Michael Flynn himself was questioned by the FBI. And so that is why it is very sensitive and has been long-held protocol to not comment on ongoing investigations. So as a former Department of Justice employee, Sally Yates was likely sensitive to doing that. We also know that former General Flynn, Michael Flynn, had some questions about whether he had filed adequate paperwork regarding work he'd done for Turkey. He registered as a foreign agent just recently, after he had left the White House. So there are all these questions of whether he really was forthright in describing the work he had done and was paid for foreign governments.
All right, very interesting stuff. Margaret Brennan at the White House. Thank you so much, Margaret.